How's it going, everybody? You're listening to the Let's Talk podcast, the show that brings you the latest in relevant and current trends and conversations about our daily living, the Bible, and also some very fun and unexpected points of view. With your hosts, Joey Santos and Brad Wilson.
Hey, so Brad Wilson, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Joey Santos.
It's gonna be an interesting conversation because we already have like two podcasts unrecorded before this one.
Yeah,
So.
we did. And I don't know, man. I feel like the lights in here are brighter than normal.
I know.
Either that, or maybe I'm just getting old.
You're just getting old. You're just getting
old.
old. So we all are. Man, it was a big weekend. We're recording this the day after Halloween. How was Halloween for you guys?
It was like normal.
What's normal for you?
At this point, I just sit out in my driveway. I got 2 candy bowls. I've got one. It's got the Lindsay bought some candy, and I was like, well, let's just get rid of if we're going to have any leftovers, let's get rid of the trash. So I threw the stuff in there I don't really want, and then I got the good stuff in reserve. But I also buy some packs of the full size, and then Kroger, I know they're getting mad at me in the checkout line, but they had a thing of, like sometimes Kroger's like, hey, if you buy 5 loaves of bread, then it's like they're $3.99. Then there's a sign on there that says, well, if you buy 5 loaves, you can get them for $2.50.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, who's gonna eat 5 loaves of bread? It's not like I'm it's not like I got an army of people there, so I'm like, I never buy it. But these things, buy 5 or more candy bars, all of a sudden they went down from like $1.50 to 70 cents.
Okay.
So I just started buying a bunch of those because I just asked some of the kids if it's questionable. The older ones, if you're in middle school or if you're in high school and you're still putting in work as a trick-or-treater, I'm going to at least reward you. So I give the full size. But like the little minions.
Oh, yeah. Oh, really?
Unless the costume's good, they don't get the full size. But so I had some of those. So I have that bag, and then it's with me, but it's hidden. And then I have the other thing. And then as it goes on, so we sit there and pass stuff out. They DoorDash Chipotle to me. Kyle was out there helping me. My oldest, he finally retired from trick or treating. Last year was his last year of doing it, because I thought, it's like, man, once you get to a certain point.
See, that's so interesting because in our house, we absolutely do not care.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
so you have the light off?
No, we leave the light on, and I, because my thing is like I don't want people like bother me with it.
I'm not surprised.
So I told Laura, I said, hey, I get some candy. Mm-hmm. We put in the bowl and put outside. Leave the light on. It's right there. Go. But what was weird about it is that they're just walking by, like, and we don't have much movement in our neighborhood, not at all. Mm-hmm. So what we saw yesterday, like, few kids that came by, they're driving around.
Yeah.
Which it's interesting. They don't just take a walk. They're just, we don't. So, like, it crossed my mind yesterday, but the rain came in, and I was like, oh, man, it's raining.
Yeah.
Not sure when to stay out here in the rain. The weather was good, though. It felt good outside. I wish I had a smaller fire pit to put outside in the driveway and just sitting there. And
yeah, you're right, though. People, that's what I was noticing, too. People were driving up and stopping.
Yeah.
The kids out, and I don't know. To me, it just seems if you can't walk to get candy, I mean, pretty soon they're gonna have some of these kids are gonna have limos.
It's gonna be like a prom night, like
it's gonna be like Halloween prom.
Kids gonna get together, rent a limo, and just drive around.
Like, make these kids put in some work. So, yeah, that's just the thing. That's just the thing that cracks me up with them. I'm like, man, pretty soon we're gonna have prime delivery for Halloween. Gonna have contracts on. Yeah, I don't
order online.
I got my costume on. I'm sitting here online. I'm on my porch. Will you just Amazon? Will you go up to this cul-de-sac and just bring my candy to me? I mean, pretty soon it's gonna happen.
DoorDash Halloween.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much with gas prices now. If you're gonna drive around the neighborhood, just go to Kroger, buy a couple of bags, give it to your kids.
I know, right?
Yeah, but
so, do you think it's coming to an end? Because it's kind of weird. I've seen people go. I look on social media,
Uh-huh.
which is the most you know, trustworthy
verifiable.
source of information.
Uh-huh.
But you cannot question pictures. I mean, pictures
Yeah.
are facts,
Yeah.
right? You look at the pictures, and some people they went all out.
Yeah.
Like I look at some of my friends. I mean, the entire family just dress up like
Yeah.
all out. And I have absolutely personally, I have no issues with Halloween being like it's a dark holiday or something. I know most I see is people just having fun, dress up in their characters that they like.
Yeah.
Laura showed me this morning. This family they dress up like the TV show Friends, and they actually went got the couch out to a fountain place somewhere and did the whole intro. They did a video.
Dang.
It was so well done, so creative.
Uh-huh.
But I see more and more people going all out in terms of having fun. You know, dress up in their characters and going out. And so, what do you think is happening? Is there's a shift happening in Halloween as do you think the culture is changing a little bit instead of being this scary thing, is becoming more like a cartoon movie time for people to just get out and here's my character right here's
Yeah, there's some interesting memes for Halloween, some stuff that the the I've got a theory for it. Is it's moving, like you said, it's moving from less of the, because like if you look at I think it's AMC that shows like a Halloween movie every day or night in October, but like you look at it's different now from the at least for me, and I can't speak before that because I wasn't alive, but like the 80s, 90s, a lot of the Halloween stuff is kind of the scary thing of, you have your movies, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, all like the 50 movies they made with that, Friday the 13th, all these things. So this stuff's kind of moving on. It almost seems now like some people that are using it, it's just another excuse to have like a party or go and do something fun. So like they take their kids out there, but it's a different. It has changed. It's become much more commercialized.
Now,
do you
think it's commercialized or is becoming more actually, like you said, is an excuse now to get together?
Yeah, I think it's the case. 'Cause, I mean, it used to be a lot of times with the decorations, now everyone has the it's like for everything. The Easter, they'll have those like in kind of those inflatable Easter bunnies, and they have their Christmas thing, their Halloween things. Where it used to be the standard decoration for Halloween was a jack-o'-lantern.
I know, right?
You know, a pumpkin. They would carve it
Now
up.
those things are very friendly on people's yards. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and you because that would be the thing. Is I remember when our pumpkins got smashed, like you'd carve these things up, you put them out there, and then you'd light them up. It's like a thing every night. And then I remember some clowns in the neighborhood came and smashed our pumpkins.
And now it became very artistic on the pumpkin, right? People are actually doing some art with the pumpkin. I mean, have you seen Dale Reeves?
Yeah.
They all did like the Star Wars.
Yeah. May the force be with them.
I know. It's so that's to me is like looking at change.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, people because I friend of mine in Indianapolis, Halloween started a week ago. They already had like 2 Halloween parties a week ago over the weekends. And then yesterday they had all dressed up all over again for a whole. So if things are changing, what can we learn from these changes? What lessons can we learn from Halloween? Which is kind of a weird podcast for a church, right?
Yeah.
Learning lessons from Halloween. But I think there's some lessons here to learn. There's some things we should pay attention to. So in your observations, what do you think are the things that we can look at Halloween and say, hey, there's some changes happening here that we should pay attention to?
Well, I think one of the things that we're seeing from it is people like to get together. So in my neighborhood, there were groups of families that were trick or treating, going around together. So there was younger kids, their parents are going with them, but it wasn't just like, okay, one family. You'd have three families together, kind of just going through the neighborhood, and everyone was dressed up, mom, dad, kids, and in these multiple families. So I think we talk a lot about this community aspect, but I think for some people it's another reason to get together, almost as if a shift now is we used to maybe have community or get together much easier. It was more common, but now as things are different, sometimes we need scheduled or planned events to get together because it doesn't happen as naturally as it did in years past. So that to me is one of the things I think we see from it is, people like that to it's a great way for them to get together. Like they crave it.
Yes.
And so this just creates a situation for it to happen.
And the whole costume thing seems to be a good excuse to get together, right? Because it makes it fun, and people are actually getting together. Do you think the church in general, I'm not talking about a specific church, the church in general, do you think the church has missed the point, that has missed this opportunity? Because I see again, it goes back to social media, and I see this debate on the church should not embrace this holiday, the church should stay away from it, the church, this is a dark holiday. I mean, really, and some churches that actually surprise me on doing that. I see churches, and then there's the churches doing the trying to combat Halloween by creating church events the day off to prevent kids from going around their neighborhood so they can come to church. I mean, are we missing the point?
I don't know if we're missing the point. As much as it's just really, we used to do trunk or treat where people would have all these cars and they kind of they dress up their trunk.
And you used to do that on the day of Halloween or on a different day?
I was always on a different day.
Okay.
And just an opportunity for people to come up, and some people liked it because there was, especially if they had little kids, less places to walk.
Yeah.
I mean, kids liked it because I get more candy.
Yeah.
But some of that stuff has changed. It's always though the church is in an interesting place because with a lot of things you go into with a lot of these different events and holidays, it's like you can make the argument of Halloween's easy because they're like, well, this is dark, witches and devils and ghouls and all these things. But then you go and look at the same thing and you could make the argument with some people. It's like, well, man, you with your Easter baskets and your Easter bunnies and all that stuff, you diminish the resurrection.
Yeah.
Because we go there and we celebrate things of, hey, go find your Cadbury eggs in the yards and.
But again, the churches are doing that, right? Their churches now. This Saturday before Easter, they're like competing to who gets more Easter egg hunt going on in their neighborhood. Church is doing this.
Yeah.
So are we again? So what we're doing?
I just think sometimes it's easy in the church in general to lose track or focus of the big picture. And when you have things, it's a struggle sometimes for people to operate in, and for churches to operate in the culture without being because you have to function in your culture.
Okay,
But
Paul,
you-
time out. Okay, I know. Sorry. I want to, let's mark this for a second. You have to function in your culture. Let's dive a little deeper into this. Let's just, do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's, now you just hit something here to me. What do you mean with you have to function in your culture?
You have to, like, in your culture, your community, you have to exist. The church should be one of the most relevant places and just, for lack of a better term, living beings in the culture. Like, where you find yourself at in your communities, and in culture is kind of a broad term, but we as a church, we should be involved in our communities. Like, in your church, our people should be involved civically. They should be involved with the schools. They should be involved with the business. Should be involved with what's going on. Like, we shouldn't be. You can remain committed to God. You can remain and operate as pure and as holy and as reverently as you should be. But that doesn't mean that to do those things, you've got to withdraw or like kind of put up hey, it's like your church has a moat around it. We pulled the drawbridge up. Like, that can't be the case. Because when you look in the New Testament, our example of the church, they were functioning in the cultures they were in. They were involved with them. Like, so in Jerusalem, right? It wasn't like Jerusalem was a hotbed for Christianity till the day of Pentecost came. But then these people were meeting. They were taking care of each other. They were functioning. Yes. They were functioning in that city. And then as it spread, and that was the challenge for some of them. The challenge was, hey, you need to be present with the people that you're around. Like, you don't withdraw from them, but you also don't just, now that you've known these things and now that Jesus has changed your life, you live as a changed person, but you don't abandon all these people you're around. And I think that's the struggle we have sometimes.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's come back here, the next segment. Let's dive deeper into that, because this is a good conversation. On the Halloween season follow-up with Brad Wilson, like I call Bishop Wilson, and Jerry Santos. We'll be right back. What makes City Life Plus even more special and better all around is that it is for everyone. This platform has kids content for students, podcasts, music, and traditional content to help you grow Christians. So there really is something for everyone on here. We hope you have had a chance to check it out. If not, please do. We'll be adding new material monthly, and we'll post on the social media channels when we do, so make sure to subscribe and follow our social media channels so you know when new content is released. Okay, Brad, let's go back to this, because it really got my attention. Function in our culture, and before we end that last segment with you talking about Acts chapter 2, right?
Yeah.
When the Holy Spirit came, it's kind of interesting, because that's when the church established where it was very clear how much they started actually functioning in their culture. Mm-hmm. It was not about the building. It was not about the location. It was not. No, they are actually fully integrated into the culture, and as the numbers were coming in, they became even more integrated into the culture. I don't think they abandoned their beliefs. I mean, they had their battles. Mm-hmm. But as things progress after Acts chapter 2, and the church starts to grow, then the challenge starts to come. I mean, you don't have to go too far. Just start reading all the letters that Paul wrote to the churches to see, man, they're not they're having a time figuring it out what the church is supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
They're missing the point of, well, like you said, the big vision for the church, the big mission. So, do you think we're, as a church overall, at the Big C Church, do you think we're losing sight of how we actually function in a culture that's actually is challenging the church more than ever? Do you think the church is actually, do you think the strategy of going back to your own corners to set our points and make a statements and show that, trying to preserve our identities, do you think that's causing the church actually to lose ground instead of what's the strategy here? To still function in a culture that's combating the church so much.
Well, I may have a difference compared to some people. I don't think we've really lost a lot of ground. I just think we're realizing we've never had as much ground as we thought we've had. Because that's to me I think what's happened recently is for a lot of what's happened a lot of around the culture is people have just stopped playing church, and they don't feel any guilt about things, and we've realized, yeah, we don't have the ground, or we don't have the acquisitions that we've had.
Relevance is a big thing, right? I mean, do you think the church, are you saying the church has not been relevant as they thought they were, or they actually stopped being relevant?
I just think that what we're seeing is that for years we've taken and we've defined if you want to say a Christian disciple, whatever it is, we've equated people that, and in our country, people that identified as Christians could be something as the Creasters, the Christmas and Easters, or they show up at a church for a baptism, or they show up at the church for a wedding, which is define themselves, that I'm a Christian with that. And so people just looked at, they would base it off whether they came to church or their involvement in some type of event or activity. But now that everything has changed, and we're seeing, doesn't matter who talk to, our guest Barry Cameron came in this past weekend talking to him, and he's talking about how, churches, doesn't matter if it's Texas, Ohio, Wyoming, Virginia, wherever it is, that people getting back there. I just think what we're realizing now is that I think there's less guilt that people have for not for not being at church. And we're just seeing that now people they've kind of had this, had this burden removed where we're just more comfortable justifying whatever we do, or just doing what we want to do. And so I think what we're realizing now is that we thought, we have the mega churches, the mega church movement kind of lulled us into thinking like, this stuff's taking hold. And you look around, you're like, no, it hasn't. The mega church just provided entertainment venues for people. Mm-hmm. And so now what's happening with some churches is that go there is we realize, all we're seeing now is that it's what's been going on for the longest time is people operate they operate out of convenience more so than conviction.
There you go. I think it's interesting because it's hard to get out of that habit, right? So it's as to this day, I think churches are still looking for ways to attract people, not to lead people into conviction, to attract people. So if we can attract people, I think we can get everything else accomplished. Well, there's some truth to that, except my personal opinion, I don't know where they actually fit into the whole aspect of discipleship, real discipleship, relational discipleship, right? So, I mean, Jesus knew that. Jesus knew one thing. The big crowds are following him for two reasons. The big crowds, right? The big crowds are following him for two reasons. The magic show and food, free food.
Yeah.
They knew, like, we're gonna follow this guy because every time we follow him, he gonna put up a magic show. He's gonna do something I've never seen it before, and he usually provides free food.
Yeah.
But he knew very well that when it comes down to the ones who believe and the ones who practice and the ones who actually do what he does, we see this in Ephesians 6. The description that he gives is that the numbers keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think sometimes, the mega church movement in general got really good in becoming an attractive place for people to find entertainment, to find a big community to belong, to find all those things and I think some churches actually were able to use as a conduit for people to actually find in smaller communities, like small groups, and they did that very well.
Yeah.
But again, the sustainability of the mega church is still centered on the production value, right? So how good can I produce this to keep people coming in?
Well, not that it's bad, but like you think of you go around here and you think of some things you think of some of the churches. It's some of the churches in our area. Like we have within 3 or 4 miles, right? We have some large churches, some churches that, and even if you go back to pre-COVID, before that, and you look at our church, and if you take that in there with people that are coming through our church, at one point around here we were consistently around the 2,000 person mark a weekend, and some of these other churches around here larger than us. But even with all that stuff put in together, within 5 miles, what the statistics and the data tell us is that with at one point 3 or 4 churches that were easily 1,500 people plus, there's in 5 miles over 60,000 people that know Jesus.
Yeah.
So you can look and say, oh yeah, this stuff is good, but then you can look and say, well,
what are we doing?
Well, shoot, there's still a bunch of people that aren't out there. So it's like, yeah, there's some good things, but it almost, to me, kind of maybe lulled us into thinking we're making this huge impact. So, and this is the fascinating question to me, is I think that the term disciple is, I think what we're realizing is what we've defined. I think our definition for years in the church of a disciple was someone that showed up Sunday after Sunday.
Boom.
But that's not
it.
I think when you get into disciple, Mark Moore, who I think I read a lot of his stuff, and to me, where I think the guilty of this, where there's a shift with it is, he talks about in Quest 52, he defines a disciple as a lifelong student, a lifelong learner. And I think what we've seen as God's kind of pulled this curtain back is that a lot of our people that were in churches, and I'm going to say this is what we need to own as pastors in the church. We became fine as long as they were here. We're like, that's good. But when we in the church, when we put our expectation on solely attendance and not spiritual development, then that's where I think we started missing some of the things. Because if you go to a disciple and it's a a lifelong student, a lifelong learner, someone that's going to follow Christ, a student of Christ, a lifelong follower of Christ. That frames it up different rather than the attendance piece. And so I think when you get into that, that's where we've dropped the ball a little bit, because I think in some ways it just became, I don't know if we relaxed a little bit, but we just took for granted that everyone's out and they're doing these things. And so that's where I think we've missed it, because not that this stuff is bad, and it sounds like I'm saying all the stuff in the church is bad, but it's just, it becomes so easy to take our eye, as they say, take our eye off the ball. And I think the challenge now is there's so many things competing and so many things that are accessible to people, is we're trying to make inroads with people and be like, hey, Jesus is worth following, Jesus is worth committing to, and we're recognizing it's a much larger challenge because the access and the information everyone has, like think about our kids. Man, with them, if we don't regulate, like I think in my house, if we don't regulate the stuff on the phone, they can waste an entire night, and I don't know if they gain any intelligence. They can waste an entire night just looking at stuff that you're like, this stuff doesn't even matter, but they have access to all this content from their devices that helping them focus on what's important, difficult. And here's the news flash. As parents, we can say, oh, this is with our kids. Let's be honest. It's us as well. I mean, we can sit there and we just have different things where they're watching videos that make no sense. We just scroll through stuff on social media, and it's easy for us to get lost in political magooery with people going back and forth on stuff. And at the end of the night, you think, what have I spent the last 2 hours doing besides raising my blood pressure and blocking people or deleting people? So that's what I think the biggest thing is when it comes to the church now, is that now that we have access to more things, but it's kind of always been that way, is getting back to this engagement of what's going on. And really, I think in moving forward in the future, the key for the church is going to be returning, and almost crazy as it sounds, getting on the same page with Jesus about what discipleship is and looks like.
Yeah, I think the church is famous for being a late adopters of culture, in every aspect of it. The church just really come behind, a way to see what's happening, and then, what I like about what you're talking about here, what I appreciate about it is that we should be making a self-evaluation of those things.
Yeah.
We should be critical of ourselves. I mean, I think as church leaders, we should look at ourselves and say, this is just not good. And we, if families are spending more time in their mobile devices, what is the answer? Is to preach that the mobile devices are evil, or to them to be present on those devices and give them an alternative to it, or I like this organization Glue right now, because as they launch this campaign, He Gets Us, they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're putting $100 million into this to reach the lost. $100 million. When the last time you heard of a Christian organization that actually decided to put that kind of money on anything? So, but again, here they are doing an investment to bring people to communities, to local churches, to digital churches, using the technology, to meet people where they are. And I think the church just has, again, the church is a late adopter. The church usually is going to watch all these things happen and say, hey, by the way, we probably should start doing something like that. instead of the church should be more visionary. The church should actually be paying attention to the culture more closely. And it goes back to all your statement. We cannot do that if we're not functioning in our culture. If we're not sending our people to actually be with their neighbors, if we're not sending our people to be with their co-workers, if we're just telling people, hey, spend the maximum amount of time you can inside our buildings because that's where you should be. I don't know if the isolation, because if you look at it, the church can be very an isolating organization. Instead of sending people out, we always keep people, bring them in. Well, again, I'm not saying that we should not bring people in. I'm just saying we got to pay attention to the culture. And we got to take advantage of the moment that we're in and look at strategically. It's okay to say the word strategy in the church. Is strategically how we actually look at the resources that we have and use them in our favor to advance God's kingdom. Are we pay attention to that? Are we early adopters or are we late adopters? And I'm not just talking about technology. But what the church, I think, need to stop doing is being the organization that's looking the crowd go by and say, let me figure out where they're going so I can lead them. Because that's what the church has turned into lately. We got to get ahead of the game. We got to be ahead of the culture so we can actually have the condition and the position to influence people where they are. And I think we got to learn from it. That's why I like to have the conversations. What can we learn from Halloween? What can we learn from Easter? What can we learn from these holidays where people are at? And pretty soon here, if you want to have a great entertainment, in the next few weeks, you're going to see Brett and I talk about Thanksgiving. That's going to be a great conversation because you and I are pretty much on the same page on that.
Yeah.
I mean, does that resonate with you? I mean, I think we got to pay attention to it. We got to pay attention to the culture. Not that the culture dictates or determines what the church do or what we preach, but so we know how to communicate with the culture, the things that we have, the things we believe in, the mission that we have. If we don't pay attention to the culture, we don't know how to communicate with them.
Yeah.
And I think we got to pay attention to that.
Yeah, no, because the message of Jesus is relevant in any culture. The methods and the ability to communicate that is the thing where we have to pay attention and figure out how it happens and how to best do it. Because Paul was brilliant at wherever he went. I think it was Ephesus, but when he went to what some people would call Mars Hill, but when he went to, and it's like he brings up the conversation, he's like, I can see that you basically, I can see that you're men of intelligence, men of faith, and let me tell you about the God that you're really worshiping, but you don't know you're worshiping. So he had this ability to do that, and so the challenge for us is to, when you know these things, I mean, if there's one thing that hasn't changed in the history of humanity, it's the need and the desire for community.
Yes.
And for us, the challenge now is figuring out how to do that. And sometimes what we do is we throw use all the cliches today. We throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Like technology is not sinful. It's not evil. It can be used for that, but it can also be used for good. Just like if you go back you can look at anything and say, well, okay, this stuff's not bad, but it goes back to it. So for us, I think the key is with whatever we're doing is figuring out how to maximize what's in front of us and use it for good, because that's I think that's the challenge for us.
Let me ask a question before we close. Who came up with the expression, throw the baby out with the bathwater? Because it's actually a very horrible picture. I mean, come on now.
I don't know.
I mean, picture for a second. You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, who came up with that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you think of it, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, whoever came up with that probably makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, no one would do it. But
I know, right? I mean, that's the whole. But I mean, that's quite of a bad example of. When I now that you said, I was like, man, I cannot even picture doing that.
I don't know when they came up with that. That may be
It's a culture moment here.
that may be something to look up.
It's an American culture moment. Maybe we need to call Bishop LB in line. I mean, we should have him in line. You know, Bishop Matt James.
Yeah.
He probably knows the answer about this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's good.
I mean, as long as he keeps making Bengal loses, I mean, we don't know what else to do. But he's really a factor now.
He's probably laying low today, which he probably should. After Monday night's game.
I mean, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, that's a good point. But who? I don't know who came up with that saying. I may have to just look that up this afternoon.
I know, right? We're gonna have to Google up.
If you had to take one guess on, if you had to take one guess in history who made that up, if it's right, the World Cup, I'll buy you like 30 wings at beat ups.
Oh my word! I'm
Who would your
about
guess
to
be?
eat some wings now.
Who would your guess be who came up with that quote?
Oh man, I don't know, because I had to come to America to learn that. There's no even translation for that in Portuguese.
I'm trying to think. If I had to make a guess, I mean, some people may say the great leader Winston Churchill across the pond. I'm not going to say Winston Churchill. Some people may say Honest Abe Lincoln. But if I had to guess who came up with that quote, it's got to be an older quote. We're just going to go with a Detroit Lions legend.
There we go.
No, I don't think it's Night Train Lane. He would have come up with a quote, but I mean, who you think came up with it?
I don't know. It's just a very horrible picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's against Halloween, so
Yeah.
we're right on theme.
Is it Julius Caesar?
There you go.
Henry Ford.
Hey, listen, I don't want to go away without recognizing we got a new producer in the room today.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, maybe this one-man show actually works better. I don't know.
Yeah. The one-man band. What a legend.
Well, good to see you, dude. We'll see what we'll talk about next week.
Sounds like a plan.
We'll come up with something.
All right, buddy.
Later.
Thanks for joining us this week on Let's Talk Podcast. Make sure to check us out at ccliveplus.com, where you can listen to past episodes and subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. And one more thing. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating on iTunes and tell someone about the show. Until next time.